Hi gang, the latest Crusade supplement sees the focus of Warhammer 40k move back to the hive world of Armageddon. But this time, it's not the orcs that are invading, but a much older threat. The Daemon Primarch of the World Eaters, Angron the Red Angel, has returned, and he isn't happy about it. Hey look, there's merch! Get a Space Froggy t-shirt over on the store, link below. Armageddon is one of those planets that never really gets a break in Warhammer 40k. The site of numerous invasions and wars, and of course narrative campaigns, the planet is famed for its 3 great wars. The last, against the returning horde of War-Garzacle, ended with a standard Pyrrhic Imperial victory. But it seems the focus is shifting back to Armageddon once again with the next Crusade supplement for 40k. But this time it's not the orcs that are back, but Angron, Daemon Primarch of the World Eaters, back to complete what he started 600 years before. Or possibly more than 600, dates are difficult nowadays. Armageddon has been a vital link in the Imperial supply chain for millennia, a planet of manufacturing and industry that supplies whole sectors of the Imperium, particularly noted for its military production. The planet produces arms, armour and artillery for the Astra Militarum, making it a vital node in the Imperial defence network, and this industry has turned the planet into a polluted wasteland. Outside the hive cities, the 2 main continents, Armageddon Prime and Armageddon Secundus, are ash wastes, sterile wastelands dotted with radioactive waste and swept by polluted dust storms, separated by a region of equatorial jungles down the centre. It was well known within the Imperium for the 2 great wars against the Orc War of Garzacle Thraka, and while those wars did result in an Imperial victory, the Orcs had never ceased to plague the planet in the years since. After the Third War, Garzacle left the planet, abandoning it, and in the aftermath, the Orcs were contained. Many of the overrun hives were liberated from Orc control and rebuilt, and the remaining Orcs were driven back either to the equatorial jungle, hunted by patrols of grizzled Armageddon Orc hunters, or to Hive Tempestora, the majority of which was still under Orc control. But Orcs are hard to get rid of, and they still plagued the wider Armageddon sector, so as well as the planet's standing army, the Steel Legion, it had been reinforced by other Astra Militarum units from Talon, Catachan and Vostroya, as well as a notable deployment of 45 Krieg Death Corps regiments, along with maniples of Titans from the Legio Crucius, the Warmongers. However, while the aftermath of the Second and Third Wars are very obvious, traces of the First War were less noticeable. Unknown to most in the Imperium, due to a contentious incident involving the Space Wolves and an Inquisitorial purge, you can see my video about that, Armageddon had in fact been invaded by the forces of Chaos hundreds of years before. The first war for Armageddon saw the Daemon Primarch Angron invade the planet in 444 M41, narrowly defeated by the Space Wolves and the Grey Knights, and relics of that war still persisted, notably a great obsidian monolith on the edge of the equatorial jungle, known to turn any who approached it mad with bloodlust. And it was sites like that that would presage Armageddon's next invasion. The Armageddon sector had always been at risk from warp storms, and the spread of the Great Rift across the galaxy caused those to flare up. The sector had been the target of one of the Blood Crusades in the immediate aftermath of the Rift, as Khorne forces assailed the Imperium, but while this particular Blood Crusade had been broken by the Orcs as it attempted to go through Golgotha, remnants of the Khorne cult infected the whole system. On the surface of Armageddon, the faults caused by the First War flared in sympathy with the warp, and cult activity reached an all-time high. Areas of the surface of the planet mutated with strange energy, and in the immediate aftermath of the Rift, the Salamanders had deployed to the planet to stop a cult from summoning Angron back, something that, at the time, seemed to be sorted. Anyway, those warp energies were strongest at a site in the Fire Wastes across the boiling sea from Armageddon Prime and Secundus, a site known as the Red Angel's Gate, as it was said to be where Angron had made planetfall during the First War. The Red Angel's Gate was a seething warp anomaly that lay at a convergence of ley lines, and it had been widened by the opening of the Great Rift. Incursions of demons had become common, and regiments of Steel Legion stationed along the coast of the Fire Wastes had either fallen to chaos or been killed when the gate flared. The first mainland hive to feel the spreading corruption was Hive Thoradis on the coast of Armageddon Secundus, just down from the ruined Hades hive, where Yarick had made his last stand in the previous war. In the aftermath of the rift, Thoradis found itself isolated and besieged by legions of heretic cultists, Chaos Marines, demons, and titans. Seeing no way out, as the heretics overran the lower levels of the hive, its commanding officer, Colonel Burkant, had destroyed Thoradis, sabotaging the power cores as the invaders entered the city and killing many of them. But the ruins of Thoradis and of nearby Hades had then become a base of chaos activity on the planet, and the slaughter that happened at Thoradis fed the Red Angel's Gate even more, which flared like a beacon in the warp. Leagues away, in the unspace of the realm of chaos, the ancient flagship of the World Eaters, the Conqueror, responded to that beacon. Slaughter was calling its master to Armageddon, and it ignited its engines, many chaos ships and demons dragged along in its wake. But this disturbance of the warp was also noticed by the prognosticars of the Grey Knights on faraway Titan. Angron was coming for Armageddon, and the Imperium must be warned. Their immediate response was to deploy the 5th Brotherhood under Grandmaster Rothweir Morvans to Armageddon, and they sent out missives to numerous nearby chapters to send reinforcements, especially those who had fought to defend Armageddon before. Astartes forces from the Hammers of Dawn, Silver Skulls, Sons of the Phoenix, Salamanders, and Raptors were present, those last two having fought in the jungles of the system during the Third War. And realizing that Armageddon's two greatest defenders, the Black Templars and the Space Wolves, were not exactly friends of the Grey Knights, the prognosticars crafted some more unique visions to send to them. Meanwhile, on Armageddon, the rise in general levels of warp juice caused the civil strife, so constant on the planet anyway, to boil over. Regiments of the Steel Legion, especially those near Thoradis, turned their weapons on their allies, and despite the best efforts of the Ministorum, the corruption spread south, led by influential demagogues. The cult leader Ascara the Ensanguined, an ex-orc hunter who discovered that jungle monolith years before, rose to prominence in the ruins of Thoradis, calling herself the Prophet of the Red Angel, her cultists constructing icons to Angron to draw their saviour near. The Imperial reinforcements, though, would arrive first. Far away on Fenris, Njal Stormcaller, rune priest of the Space Wolves, had a mysterious vision, who knows where that came from, of a world in fire, drowning in blood. Doom came for Armageddon. The Space Wolves currently had companies deployed to the Armageddon wider sector, purging orc infestations, but when Logan Grimnar received the communication from his old friend, he pulled his forces out and made speed for the planet. The Space Wolves had defended the planet during the First War, when Angron had invaded Armageddon the first time, and he wouldn't let it fall again. His champions of Fenris, plus elements of the Blackmanes, Bloodmoors, and Deathwolves, arrived in orbit shortly after, and Grimnar appraised the situation. As he saw it, the defences were in tatters, the weakest points being across the less populated Armageddon Prime, and so the Space Wolves made planetfall there, near Hive Volcanus, deploying into the Hive proper, Wolf Scout kill teams engaging masses of hideous mutants that spread through the lower levels. Meanwhile, at war in the Octarius sector, High Marshal Helbrecht of the Black Templars received another mysterious vision, this time from the God Emperor himself. Definitely. A vision of Hive cities crumbling, cities he recognized. The Black Templars had been instrumental during the Third War. Trusting to his faith, the Eternal Crusader, the flagship of the Templars, hove around and made full speed for the system. They arrived after the Space Wolves, and seeing their reinforcement of Prime, the Black Templars deployed to Armageddon Secundus, establishing a command center in Hive Infernus, and immediately they sallied out to push back the Hive's besiegers, advancing alongside the Krieg's 74th Line Corps, who then sunk trenches into the wastes. Though there was no love lost between the two Space Marine chapters, the Black Templars were assisted in this by Styrbjörn Flintai, a trusted wolf guard of Grimnar's retinue, who led a detachment of Space Wolves into the trenches as they spread towards the heretic outposts in the wastes between Hades and Thoradis. Soon after that, these new trenches and emplacements were formalised, and Helbrecht's Castellan, Holzer, was placed in command of a new defensive line, named the Imperator Line, designed to try and contain the Chaos forces streaming south from the two fallen hives. Initially, the repulsion of Chaos forces went well. Castellan Holzer's impetuous tendencies were balanced out by Colonel Corps of the 74th Line Corps, and the defenders made progress in repulsing the waves of cultists and heretics, and then pushing back further into the wastes before stopping and constructing new defense lines each time, slowly corralling the heretics back towards Thoradis. And then finally, Morven's and the 5th Brotherhood of the Grey Knights arrived, dispatching interceptors to the fire wastes to investigate. Morven's found the wastes horrifically changed. Fortresses of blackened iron loomed out of the cratered lands, their spiked ramparts covered in grisly trophies, and rivers of molten brass pouring from their gates. Chaos had spread across the whole continent. The gates had to be closed, but with the planet overrun and already in rebellion, it would be difficult to amass the numbers needed to do so. And then the Conqueror arrived, teeming demon ships in its wake. With the 3 Astartes forces already in system, the Imperials had superiority, but the Conqueror was an ancient and indomitable ship, and it blasted its way into orbit, expandable cornate demon ships acting as a screen as the flagship remained just long enough to achieve combat drop. Bulk landers, drop pods, and fleet lighters swarmed from the Chaos vessels. Many would be shot down by the defenders, but the horde of cultists was so numerous that the guns of the hive cities would never stop all of them. The first wave of invaders landed in northern Secundus, fortifying the Chaos forces in the ruins of Thoradis and Hades hives, erecting monuments and spreading the influence of the Red Angel's Gate south. There they surged towards the advancing Imperator line and blunted its steady progress. Packs of demons and jackal cultists swamped the lines, pushing back the loyal defenders until the mass slaughter in the trenches caused a rift in the sky above, and it was in this way that Angron reappeared on Armageddon for the first time in 600 years. Packs of slavering fleshhounds and legions of bloodletters summoned in his wake overwhelmed the outer Imperator lines and swarmed the defenders, who were then forced back over ground they'd spent days taking, until eventually Holzer and Corps were all that remained of the command staff. As they fell back, the Kriegers called down mass bombardment on their positions, hoping the flames would cover their retreat. Back in Infernus, Helbrecht still sought what advantage he could from this. With many cultists being drawn east to Thoradis by the appearance of Angron, the lines outside Hades were suddenly wide open. The High Marshal assembled a countercharge, hoping to reach Hades and cut the 2 Chaos-held hive ruins off from each other, taking the Eumenides Bridge as he did so. But though he had support in the form of the Titans of Legio Crucius, they were opposed by a recently landed force of traitor titans and eventually forced back to Hive Infernus to regroup. But when they arrived, they found Infernus in turmoil. Half the Savlar regiments stationed in the Infernus Key district had turned to Khorne, and alongside the cults bubbling up through the city, had slaughtered the dock workers and declared allegiance to Angron. Helbrecht, of course, sparing no mercy for things like that, ordered the entire of Infernus Keys scoured of life, with no distinction made between friend or foe. Meanwhile, on Armageddon Primus, the invaders had made planetfall in 2 places: north of the Vulcanus Mountains around the orc-held Hive Tempestora, and then further south on the edge of the equatorial jungles. Grimnar had been quick to whip the defenders into shape, taking command of Hive Vulcanus and dispatching his packs to crush traitor resistance while he redeployed the meager forces he had. His priority was to hold the Hive and to reinforce the plains of Anthran to the south, trying to prevent the various traitor drop sites from wheeling round and outflanking him. However, the weight of forces to the south, driven forward by World Eaters traitor legionnaires and reinforced from the equatorial jungles, was simply too much, and eventually they forced the Great Wolf's forces to withdraw from the plains entirely. In the face of frenzied attacks by newly arrived cultists and brazen demon engines, the veteran regiments deployed to the plains were forced to fall back, retreating through the southern foothills of the Vulcanus Mountains, where they established 3 thin lines of defences, still attempting to prevent a total encirclement. However, unsupported and with dwindling supplies, Those lines didn't last long. The Orientum line collapsed first, falling under waves of relentless traitors, which forced the abandonment of the more southern Meridium line, as the heretics outflanked it. The only thing that stopped the retreating Imperial forces from being slaughtered wholesale was a sudden surprise assault on the Chaos forces by orcs from the equatorial jungles. The Greenskins had seen the violence erupting across the planet and wanted to join in the fun themselves. The beast snagger tribes of the jungles surged forth into the rear of the Khornate lines, allowing the Imperial survivors to reach the Vulcanine Wall, the third defensive line, built into the foothills and within range of great ordnance batteries that were built into the mountains themselves. And while this all happened, Grimnar found himself embroiled in the fighting to the north of High Vulcanus, confronting and eventually banishing the bloodthirster Zulkor, who had led another Khornate force south. And of course, while all this was going on, Angron had plans too. Although he was a towering being of infinite rage and slaughter, he was no fool, and he wouldn't leave himself at the mercy of the tides of the warp like last time. He tasked his lieutenant, Jarok Skriel of the Eightbound, with the construction of more monoliths in the Fire Wastes to feed the growing power of the warp, and Skriel used his demonic nature to warp across the planet, making sure the tides of empiric energy were aligned. It was that the Grey Knights attempted to foil. They deployed strike teams across the planet to disrupt Skriel's plans. Brother Captain Hendron purged the Diabolus Forge complex east of Infernus and recovered ancient Mechanicus weapon caches. Librarian Lovric purified the primary monolith sited deep in the jungles, holding off attacking bands of orcs to do so, and Grandmaster Morvans deployed repeatedly to the Fire Wastes, tearing down Khornate idols wherever he could to slow the spread of corruption, but the violence raging across the planet was only feeding the rift. He'd need more help to stop it completely. Morvans gathered the various commanders aboard the Bright Sword, his flagship. Grey Knights, Inquisitors, and holographic feeds from Grimnar and Helbrecht amongst them. Fundamentally, they needed to seal the Red Angel's gate. That was the real threat, not Angron, but the gate that allowed him to stay manifested. Angron was advancing on Acheron and Infernus hives, and that Imperator line would only be a temporary pause for him. They had to lead the Horde away from the line and try and open a route for an army to cross the boiling sea and assault the Fire Wastes directly. Grimnar and Helbrecht took command of the diversion. The Astra Militarum mounted a staged retreat west from the Imperator line, leading Chaos westward towards the Diabolus Forge complex in the mountainous terrain east of Infernus. There, the Black Templars, Space Wolves, and elements of the Grey Knights held the complex. Angron's vanguard poured into the valleys of Diabolus, heedless of the artillery pounding on them, but Angron knew a trap when he saw one, and he sent Goremonger packs to scale the mountains, joined by manifesting Eightbound, who silenced gun emplacements and cleared defense lines as the main body of the Horde kept sweeping into the complex. It was only when the Horde scaled the complex walls that Angron entered the fray, slaughtering Black Templars, but the Astartes of the Space Wolves led the Primarch further and further in. Eventually, they managed to lure Angron into an ancient abandoned furnace, where he faced Brother Captain Hendron. Inscribed on the floor was a silvered hexagram, but it wasn't there to disrupt or sever Angron's connection to the warp. The Daemon Primarch stepped over it with ease. No, the hexagram was there to bind the explosion from the vortex warheads that had been placed at each cardinal point, and as Angron waded into the furnace, charging at the Brother Captain, they detonated, banishing him back to the warp. Meanwhile, while that distraction played out, Morvans led the assault on the Fire Wastes. The 74th Line Corps and 24 other Imperial Guard regiments assembled on the coast of the main continents, departing from Vulcanus on Prime and Yarrick's Hope on Secundus in a fleet of repurposed landers and ocean vessels. Beachheads were established on the coast of the Wastes around the Chayarana ore mines, where the invading army met heavy resistance against Ascara's cultists and traitor penal legions freed from the polar prison complexes. Morvans and the Death Corps pushed on inch by inch as the Space Wolves and the Black Templars launched pinpoint attacks on two key monoliths in the network. The Brazen Citadel was attacked by Castell and Holzer, drawing the demons out while teleporting Grey Knights purified the Citadel's centre, and the ziggurat known as the Gore Beacon was assailed by Flint-Eye and the Death Corps of Krieg, the Space Wolves hunting packs of bloodletters and Jarok Skriel's Eightbound through the boiling tar swamps as Grey Knight gunships purified the the beacon. But the main assault was across the Crimson Mesa towards the Red Angel's Gate itself. Morvans led masses of Astra Militarum, Steel Legion and Kriegers both into the Mesa. It was a grueling armoured advance up a single path, monstrous foes screaming down from the skies to assault them all the way, but the armoured column was unstoppable. Librarian Torvik of the Grey Knights led 8 paladins in a ritual to close the gate, each of them holding a shard of Angron's shattered black blade. The Librarian used those shards to reverse the flow of the Imperial energies, and the gate painfully started to constrict. But as the plan seemed to be working, Angron returned, bursting through the portal, followed by a wave of demons. His presence led to a nightmare on the plains, as the cultists, who'd been harrying the Imperial column, were emboldened and attacked the lines in a frenzy. Angron, on the other hand, went directly for the paladins, killing one, but he was held back by a trio of dread knights. As the ritual reached its pinnacle, Angron's vast chain axe carved through 2 of the walkers, but the third was piloted by Grandmaster Morvans, who laid into the Primarch with his massive mace, psychic energy spilling across the Mesa. It didn't save him. Morvans was cut down just like the last 2, but it did buy time. The ritual was complete, and as the Red Angel's Gate finally closed, Morvans willed his suit forward and barged Angron into the contracting rift. With the gate closed, Armageddon was once again saved. And that's the end of the story. Angron returns to Armageddon, invades again, and is banished once more. What this event is actually called is not very clear. I guess this is the 4th war for Armageddon, but nobody uses that term in the book. Maybe we'll all agree to call it that in the future, though. One thing that I found quite nice about this is that it's a complete story. It's rare for a Crusade book to actually have an ending nowadays. They usually just advance the plot of a war zone a bit, leave a cliffhanger at the end. But this is a complete war with an actual conclusion, so maybe it'll enter the annals of Imperial history as such. Who knows? For now, that's us up to date with another never-ending battlefield. If you want to find out about Angron's first attempt, I've made a video about that already. Until next time, thanks for watching. And if you'd like to find out more about the world of Warhammer 40k, you can find another video probably popping up there to the right. And if you'd like to support the channel, look, there's merch and there's a Patreon and a YouTube membership scheme where you can get early access to videos and participate in things like book club. Links are all in the thing below. See ya!